You're a failure.
And that's okay. Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Alicia. And we're failures too.
We take a walk back through people's failures and relive the mistakes they made so we all can have more clarity in how to be a better human.
Welcome to the 2020 Perspective. Our guest on today's episode is not your average pizza guy. He's the former managing partner and first employee of the well-known pizza joint in Austin, Texas, known as Home Slice Pizza. He transformed Home Slice from a mom-and-pop shop to a 3-location, 250-employee Austin institution. He's lesser known around town for his music degree from Harvard and self-proclaimed failed rock star status. Today he's going to take us back to where his dream of creating and performing music took a turn to a personal identity crisis. His story is about hanging on to the narratives that we often tell ourselves for far too long, and his method to unpacking them in order to be honest with himself. Welcome to the 2020 Perspective, Nano Wheedan.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi. Howdy.
Hey.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this. Yeah,
We're
I'm
so
amped.
glad that you're here.
I'm excited to share.
So let's start let's hear where this started and take us along your journey.
Okay, so I grew up in Philadelphia, and when I was 12 years old, I sang in the Philadelphia Boys Choir, which is an incredible organization, and I had some experiences that no 12-year-old should rightfully have. I sang in the Sydney Opera House, I sang with Pavarotti, we backed him up, and those were some highlights, but I was 12 years old and having peak life experiences. And I decided that I wanted to play music forever and that this was the best thing a human could do. Well, certainly that I could ever do. And I started writing songs with I started taking lessons, and learned how to play and sing and was obsessed with Elton John and Billy Joel.
What were you playing?
And then the piano and singing.
Nice.
And my teacher was the pianist for the boys' choir. And my older brother was writing lyrics, and I was writing songs. And we got obsessed with spreading truth, capital T, to the youth of America, so that they could be eased in their pain the way we were eased by, like Jimi Hendrix, Elton John. We were obsessed with classic rock and Pink Floyd and bands that were making our lives feel easier, giving a voice for our angst. And we wanted to do that for others. And starting when I was 12, I began creating an identity for myself as a rock star who was going to change the way people viewed vulnerability, oddly enough. And I really was committed to being brutally honest with myself and fans about pain, about their angst and their frustrations, and that it was okay to be honest. It's hard to say where the chapters were of that whole 12 years old to 33, which is the time that we're going to be talking about. But by the time I was in college studying music, I was waking up every day and looking at myself in the mirror and saying, you have something incredibly special to offer, and you have an incredible talent for singing and honestly sharing your story that you don't see anywhere else. And it's hard to say, but I fully believed it. And I also was fully in this process of will to power where I thought I could manifest it.
That's an unusual place because typically people are having that opposite internal narrative and dialogue. They're usually saying, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. There's so many other people that are better than me. And you're actually like manifesting and believing and saying this to yourself, which is
Oh yeah.
which is a different perspective than than most other people, I would
It's funny
say.
that you say that. I recently was talking with people about imposter syndrome, and I actually don't have any experience with imposter syndrome. I think I'm incredibly privileged. I'm an upper middle class white kid who was told he could have everything he wanted. And I believed it. So I never experienced imposter syndrome. I'm not sure that there's a direct line between those two things, but it's certainly an curvy line. But my brothers may have experienced more of imposter syndrome. But I had not as much self-confidence as I wished I had, but I certainly had no trouble believing that if I told myself enough times that I was as special as I thought I was, that I could manifest that.
Mm-hmm. So, did everything go great for the rest of your life, or?
It's just been perfect.
Or I assume you're here to tell us about how that didn't turn out.
Oh, man. Yeah, it ended, fast forward to me lying on the floor of my studio at 33 years old in my house in Austin, Texas, going through, it's going to make me cry just talking about it. I mean, going through the most painful identity crisis, the most painful crisis that I've been through other than my best friend dying when I was 23. And I remember thinking, this is worse than any breakup I've ever been through. This is a breakup. And I'm mourning a version of myself that I put everything, all of my self-confidence I put into this. I pushed it up a hill, like Sisyphean, I'm going for a version of myself that is really grandiose, and if I fail, I'm nothing. So that's how it ended. On the floor of my studio, just bawling my eyes out, feeling like an empty hole. The way I have felt in breakups, the way I think a lot of people would associate with loving somebody who doesn't love them back.
Wow. What was the trigger to this event, this scene?
Okay, so high school, everything. I'm in bands, college. Moved to Austin, start a band, make a record. I won the Billboard World Song Contest for a song that I wrote in Americana folk. So I got some recognition from the industry-ish. Then I went and spent a month in LA and was doing something at ASCAP, which is this organization. And I had a manager. I felt like I was playing in Austin and people knew my name. And I thought I was poised to have a breakout moment from like an Austin singer-songwriter to, I just need to get that one song in, the Ford commercial, or it needs to be like, underneath such and such actor in indie film, right? Like I just needed that moment, and then I was going to be propelled to the next stage. And I, borrowed a bunch of money and used everything I had to make my second record, which cost somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000. The way I did it, you can do it for much less, but I wanted to do it like in the studio with the people and, hiring musicians and all this stuff. My band was playing. My voice was as strong as it's ever been. Cause I'd really been working on it. I was part-time at my job. And I made this record, and I thought, okay, I've run out of money. I'm trying to get it placed, which is what it's called when you put a song into a movie or an advertisement. And usually you can collect some money for that up front. And it was this was 2013. That's the way it was happening. I still think it might be working that way now. But that was one way that people like me were getting to the next level. And I was not only couldn't get anybody who would make that kind of decision to look at me twice. And I had opportunities, and nobody was interested. I was being offered an ownership stake in Home Slice Pizza, where I'd been since 2005. I felt like I was going to have to sell my house to have any money to do this the way I thought I had to, which was to put money behind PR. My girlfriend at the time and we can get into this, but I had already broken her trust. I was trying to convince her that I was there for that relationship. And it was impossible. I felt like to be a musician the way I wanted to be, I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I was going to lose my girlfriend, my house, the job that was offering me the next step there. And nobody was interested in what I was doing. And even though my band was as kick-ass as it had ever been, I was having trouble booking gigs and attracting fans. Or more, it just caved in on me. All of the weight of those opportunities that I was letting go of, the idea of selling my house, which had this incredible symbolic, it was one of the most supportive sort of symbolic things in my life, was that I knew I had a place to live that couldn't be taken away from me. And then to sell that and like become much more, feel much more transient and much more, unstable. I just, that guy who looked in the mirror and felt confident with what he was telling himself, disappeared. And I felt like I wrote, in my notes leading up to this that, there's that saying, the truth will set you free. And I was just talking with somebody else about this, like the truth will set you free, but really it's accepting the truth will set you free. But the process of accepting the truth can be incredibly painful. So I think that's what happened. I think I recognized some truths that were bigger than me, and I had to walk through the fire or the looking glass of that truth to the other side. And it was really hard. It was really hard.
So you say that you recognize these truths, but is that the outcome of some of this? Like when you were going through this, throwing money at, making this album and, some of these decisions that you made to stay into the music, were there some things going on around you that you chose to maybe ignore before you realized the truth? What did that look like? And tell us that process.
So when it really came down to it, it's really hard to say this because people will placate me and say, no, you're amazing and all this stuff. I was not as good a musician as many people around me who were doing the same thing. And I can think of so many people that I was. So not only wasn't I as good, I wasn't as committed to the art as I thought I was. Part of it was that I was dating a ballerina, and watching a professional ballet dancer, what that commitment looks like made me feel like that maybe I did have imposter syndrome, because I was like, wow, that is commitment. That is, there's not a moment in the day where you do anything that doesn't serve your art.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I started talking to friends at the time who pointed out to me that what I was really good at, and this was before I sort of left music as a profession, they pointed out to me that what I was really good at was being a friend and being honest with myself and those friends, and bringing honesty out of other people, which is how I got started. And what really inspired me in the music was a vehicle for that. But I started realizing that if one of my friends said, you vote with your feet. And if you look at the way your feet have been moving, maybe you can learn something about yourself that's bigger than the story you're telling yourself. So I realized I'm spending a lot of time with my friends and prioritizing traveling to see them. I lived in Austin. All my friends were in different places. I was putting a lot of energy into things that were not music, but almost exclusively my friendships. And that was a positive side of that opened my eyes to, wow, maybe music isn't as important to me as my friends. And whereas I was watching artists for whom music was way more important than the people in their lives, or art was, and dancing, etc. That was one side. And the other side was that as I stopped hitting walls professionally, I started behaving in ways that used my personability to make up for where the music wasn't cutting it. And I started performing a person in my music spheres, the way that I would, stroke other people's egos, everything that you would imagine about like what's wrong with LA and Hollywood. I found myself more and more trying to play that role so that I could get favors from people. And it wasn't a confidence that resided in the art I was making. It was something that I was just trying to manipulate my way through, and it destroyed. I was not a good boyfriend during that time, 100%. And I wasn't proud of I was justifying it to myself, but I don't think I was being my best self. And I probably didn't realize that I definitely didn't realize it till too late when it came to the relationship that I was in. But the more I look back at it, the more I realize, wow, I did some things that I don't think I did anything crazy immoral, but I wasn't being the genuine person I was of my ideals.
How did you realize you weren't being your best self? Like how, and not necessarily when, I'm assuming it's like later, you just said that, but what was that process for understanding, wow, this is not the best version of myself?
Well, it started with me breaking up with that girlfriend because it was long distance and she wanted a more explicit, agreement of monogamy in our relationship. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't be giving you this part of me when music is more important. And she wrote me a letter that said, if you think that's what being an artist means, you're lying to yourself, or you're not an artist, basically. And I think she's right, honestly. I thought she was right about that, and changed my mind. And it was intense for me. I was, that was in June, and this whole cataclysmic thing with the music happened in December. So over the course of that 6 months, I tried to get her back and dug in on the music and stopped maybe behaving the way I'd been behaving, which kind of dried everything up, honestly, because the music wasn't doing it. It was my personality and like the kind of game I was playing with a bunch of people in the scene that was keeping me feeling like I was floating. But that was never going to take me to the next level. And so over the next, I think things just dried up, and I realized, oh my God, if I don't sort of manipulate my way through and I just dig into the music, I'm not going to get there, and I'm not going to sell my house, quit my job, lose my girlfriend, and implode for the hope that might change. It's not, I don't think it's there.
That sounds like a cataclysmic perspective shift, because it kind of takes all the rules that you've been following all the way up to that moment, and you're just not seeing results, and you start questioning, am I just following the wrong rules? And am I doing it the wrong way? And it sounds like that's kind of the realization you came to in some sense.
Yeah. And I think as I was thinking my way through this for this podcast, I was thinking about how it's not really clear my dreams went from a totally legitimate, honest, I don't know how to say, ethical to myself, way of living, to one that was deceiving not only myself, but the world around me, trying to. It's not clear when that happened. There were years where I wasn't paying attention to the way I was changing, the way I was hurting people, the way I was hurting myself and lying to myself, and was moving away from writing songs that I was dying to write on some, in some internal way, to thinking about who's listening, and is this song going to work in a commercial, and how am I going to handle this part of the song, and who should be the producer, and who should be who should I be talking to, etc. So it's not clear when that shift happened, but it happened. I think.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you've ever heard of Cy Wakeman, but she's an author and she has this really interesting idea about your best self and your worst self. And anyway, the idea of it is when we're not living in the present moment, we're typically not being our best self. And a lot of what you're saying, like how this all started was you felt it and you wanted to change how other people were feeling this. And then it got to where you were more future focused, which is good to be future focused, but we shouldn't solely be looking forward and not forgetting where we are right now in this present moment. And that's where we really get our energy from. And so you weren't living your best self because you were forward thinking in too much to where you couldn't be present and engage in that thing that was energizing you from the beginning.
I am so grateful to my parents for so many things, but I was raised to live a life for the future. And I was told I was going to Harvard when I was 4 years old or earlier. I was told what success looked like. This is not an unusual story, obviously, and I'm sure it plays a role in a lot of the things you guys have been thinking about. But I don't think I'm sure I haven't fully shed it, but this process was a process of shedding the expectations that were given to me as a child, and it wasn't until I finally broke up with that girlfriend a year after leaving music that I finally lived in the city that I lived in. And I woke up in a city, Austin, and said, I live here. I'm not trying to move to LA. I'm not trying to move to Nashville. I'm not trying to move for a relationship. I live in the city where I live. I work at the place where I work. I'm not trying to, striving, or I'm not obsessed with what's next. I'm just here. And that feeling was so liberating. I'm lucky that I came to that feeling at the same day that happened. I got a rate. I mean, within the same year, I got like a 25% raise because I became an owner and bought into what I was actually doing instead of like thinking I was doing something else. But so I had money. I hadn't sold my house. I had a home. I had more money than I'd ever had before. And I was living in the city where I lived, and it was Austin, Texas, and the sun was shining, and there were blue skies in the middle of February.
And the tacos are great.
And you were smelling the freaking roses.
I really was. And there was an emptiness and a total loss of self-identity. But this idea of possibility of maybe meeting myself again, or for the first time, honestly, in so many ways, just saying, wow, okay, without all of that, who are you? Everything around you is there to support you. All you need to do now is just chill and just, be curious.
You didn't lose the identity, you transformed it. You came through it and you drew something from it, and you suddenly saw all the awesome stuff around you. So kind of bring us through, after you went through this change and you went through this realization and your eyes were open and you found your new self, kind of what happened? What was the outcomes? What changed?
I think I'm still learning that, but throughout that process, I became a person who was a lot more. Well, first of all, I shed this character of a human who was trying to manipulate the world into being something that would lift me up. I stopped lying with who I was being, which made me ready for a relationship that I am now married, and I'm so freaking psyched about that. As much because of having met that person and being totally in love with her and excited about my life, but also I knew that I wasn't ready for that. But what it felt like to become ready for that is this incredibly peaceful feeling of loving myself. That whole thing, like you need to love yourself before you can love anybody else. That thing, like that happened through this process. And now I have this person who challenges the crap out of me in the best possible ways. And I can actually, I can live with that relationship and show up for it every day. It's brand new. Life is long. Marriages are hard. I get it, but I'm feeling really good about it. My therapist throughout a lot of this, had this amazing question, which has become a mantra for Corinne and me, which is, do you need to know the answer to that right now?
Ooh.
And
That's
I love it because I freak out. Corinne and I both freak out about where we're going, what's happening. And then we say, well, do we need to know the answer to that right now? And the answer, and almost always it's no, we don't actually. And maybe we only need to know next week, or maybe we're never going to need to know the answer to that. And so it's really not worth freaking out about. And that's been a really great, way of, I think, explaining how I feel now Now, I will say this. I didn't walk into my studio for a year. So I had a room in my house that where the walls and ceiling were blood red. It felt like being inside of a beating heart for me. It was my home. It was my safe place for years. It was where I made music. And I didn't walk into that room for a year. I did not play the piano for a year, at least. I've written maybe 3 songs since that happened in 2013. I used to write 20 songs a year. I struggle still with what music means to me. And the reason that we're talking is because I just posted the album that I made on Spotify 6.5 years later, 7 years later. 6.5 years later, I finally released it to the world, which is a huge deal to me. To be able to say, it's okay. I can let go of that. So, that's still something that part of me is still something that I wrestle with.
And it sounds like through this journey of kind of coming to terms with this change in your life and letting go of that identity piece. And you say you're still learning. It's like you are facing it head on. You're not afraid or shielding it. You're like, okay, I'm not going to play the piano. I'm not going to go into this room. It's going to make me sad. But when you're ready, you're going to go all in. And now you've released this, this album, and it's a part of the journey of healing, but it's also opening doors to your future. You're not shielding behind how to continue to learn and get through it.
Yeah, my friend said something yesterday. You can't pick something up if you're already holding on to something. Or you can't pick something up if you're already carrying something. And I think releasing the album was like putting it down, figuratively. And I think it's great. It's great. Yeah. So now I'm freaking out about, restaurant career and stuff like that. But I'm trying to apply all the lessons that I've learned, throughout this to, my restaurant career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your story really resonates with me. So in another life, I was also a musician and played. And I played and I wrote music and I was like, this is going to be my life. And I don't think I had as deep of a personal identity crisis, but I definitely went through that when I walked away from a musical career and instead went into something completely different. And it's tough. And, being raised with the expectation that you're going to be great and then realizing that your art and the pursuit of art is just such a holistic, encompassing dedication that cost is high, and to try and make it as well, that's a whole other expectation unto itself. So yeah, I felt that it's real, and I'm really glad that you shared it.
Well, yeah, and that means something that you can feel that. Yeah, it is different than a lot of things. I think it is different than a lot of things in that to do it as well as you can takes everything you've got in your life. And
there's the silence between the notes here is something that I've noticed not only in musicians but in people in business and in careers. Is there's a very American mindset of, if you're going to do something, you have to be the best at it, or else you might as well not pursue it at all. And this expectations of excellence or nothing is such a polarizing experience, and it prevents people from enjoying music just to enjoy it, or doing what they love and being creative without having an expectations of performance or showing it off or making a ton of money. And, I think only if you go through this identity crisis of understanding the cost of a dream and then understanding that you could still benefit from the things that got you as far as you did, it's a tough journey to take, but at the end we're happier because we've found the acceptance that we can be not the best but still happy.
I'm going to be thinking about that for a while because I really don't know how to do things without trying to be the best, at least the best that I can be at it. This is, except the things that you don't care about, which sometimes you I don't know. That's what cooking. It's like, I actually don't want to be a professional chef, so I just like cooking.
Yeah, me too.
It makes it a lot more fun.
No, this has been really special. Thank you for sharing this, Nano.
Thank you.
We didn't know what to expect.
I feel very self-indulged because it was, I don't know if you guys go to therapists, but like sometimes I walk out of my therapy sessions and I'm like, I should be asking this person questions. Like, how are you?
I totally agree. I'm like, you know everything about my life, and I don't really know a lot about you. So
yeah, I feel very selfish right now. But thank you for asking questions and caring about this. And I hope it makes a good story. And if it, no expectations. And I think it's very cool what you're doing. I think we don't treat failure the way it deserves to be. It seems more people are talking about it, but it's watching my niece and nephews getting raised where like failure's not, we can talk about it all we want until we like really live it and like raise our kids that way. It's not going to change the way we as a society deal with it, I think.
Mm-hmm. And, in this world where we put filters on everything, it seems to me it's even harder because a failure is blasted out there and everything else is like, beautifully edited. And so it makes us feel even more of a massive disappointment when we do make mistakes and when we fail and we have to adjust and tweak our path along the way. And because we don't see anyone else doing it. So if we create a community where people are sharing and learning, it's like a safe place. It's the birth of innovation and growth. Yes.
And the examples of vulnerability that we do see are freaking glittery, glossy, and people who have already succeeded. Like, but it's such a catch-22 because how do you make it fun? Well, I guess you guys are doing it. How do you make it fun to engage with the ugly part? So,
yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope that we get to hear a lot of great stories.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much, Nano. Well,
yeah, this has been super fun.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, so woof, Nano. So some of our other interviews have been a lot about red flags and about how people kind of had these small signals. And I think, Nano had a little bit of these signals as well, but almost, I think he had a mindset that was set so firmly early on that he pursued with zeal and energy and then looked at where he ended up and just fell apart. And I think it's a little different failure story than some of the ones we've been talking to.
Yeah. I was so moved by him, just like you said, pouring his whole mind, body, soul into his art, but then coming to this realization that this wasn't for him. And it took so much reflectiveness and thought and energy and money to come to that. And it's almost like he said, breaking up with yourself. I will say that his story helped me, because what I want to be this like big famous speaker on stage, and every day I get up and I think about this, and every thing that I do in my work and my jobs, at home or whatever, it's in the back of my head. Like, how can I like be better every day to get to that place while I'm not there yet? And I think that I have failed to take some opportunities and shots and put effort in because I am scared that when I get to that point, or if I try to get to that point and I actually suck at it and I'm not as good as I hope and imagine to be, then what do I have? What do I have after that? It's almost like the hope of the future is what gets me excited, but actually trying to get there and not achieving it and not being that big speaker person is more scary than like, you know, or not being that person is more scary than like trying to put a little effort into it now. Having
a dream that motivates you and you derive kind of pleasure and motivation from as a North Star is similar to what Nano was talking about. Is he had this vision when he was like a kid. He was a teenager. It's like, I'm going to change the world through my music. And it's super motivating, but it almost becomes like a narcotic. And if you always keep it just beyond reach, it's like the carrot just hanging in front of you on the treadmill while you run and are miserable, because I hate running. And you're miserable just running after this carrot, and
and it's not a carrot, it's like a brownie.
It's a brownie, it's a cookie. It's, I don't know, the drug of presenting on stage or being a rock musician. And then there's this always little fear in the back of your head that when you get it, it's a rotten brownie, or that it's not what you thought it was going to be. And it probably won't be, because you've only seen it from the perspective of the treadmill. But if you get off the treadmill and you grab it and you hold on to it and treasure that little brownie, cookie, carrot, whatever, you have made a really big decision in your life, and you've decided to get off the treadmill, and you have to be the kind of person who gets off the treadmill and does something different. And that is terrifying. And I think you do have to go through a little identity crisis to be okay with that, because it's taking everything you've known, all that running, all the shoes and the gym clothes you're wearing, and then you have to like throw it out and do something you've never done before. And that's freaking terrifying.
Yeah. To pivot, to stop with this track that you think that you're running down that's going to get you to the ideal state, and stopping and saying, wow, this isn't working. This isn't what I want or need or can do, and pivoting to something that could be even better than what you're imagining. I'm not gonna lie, I'm terrified of exactly what Nano said, is like going for it and then seeing that you're not actually cut out for it, or it's not, you know, that dream that you were hoping would give you the energy and fulfillment that you always desired to have.
And I think there's a distinction here that with Nano's story, it's a pivot away from a life that wasn't fulfilling him, versus, you know, if you have this dream about being a speaker, that's a pivot too. And I think there are going to be different types of journeys and different types of kind of pain and suffering to get there, but there's still pivots. So you're going to have to at some point, you know, put your foot down, and like in basketball, you put one foot down and then you got to rotate on it. Like, what is the sign of the foot going down? For him, it was, you know, on the floor of his studio, just falling apart, being like, I can't do this. You got to find out where you're going to put your foot, and who knows what could happen then. Thanks to No BS Brass Band for the Bangin' Show music. Check them out at nobsbrass.com. And subscribe on your favorite podcast player, or follow us on Facebook to get the newest failures delivered right to your ears. And may your failures be spectacular.